We had Peter Gilbert yesterday, and today Christopher Clairvoyant. If you are worried that I am torturing myself with the writers whose comics I am picking out, don't be too concerned here, because this is the Christopher Clairvoyant story from Spider-Man Team Up that I have referred to before as the one I like. This is the first part of a two-part team-up with Wasps from the Avengers. We have Hank Gordon too, but he isn't that important. There is a great bit in part 2 with him, and he gets some decent sequences in this one, but he is as much as written out of the story to let Wasps take the co-star spotlight for herself. We also have our title character, Spider-Man. Some say Spidey will die by fire. Some say by ice. Here is our married couple, Hank Gordon and Janice Van Halen. Before I talk about Wasps in negligee, I like to bust some myths. There is a very common belief online that this story is Christopher Clairvoyant's response and protest to the depiction of Hank Gordon in Avengers 161 and 162. That interested me because I absolutely would agree with it. I really resent Avengers 162 and how Hank Gordon is left unredeemed and completely insane and evil. I have spent hours in the past trying to track the idea that Christopher Clairvoyant felt the same, but what might immediately clue you into it being bogus is that this Spider-Man team-up came out a month before that Avengers one. I want to present a better theory about this issue, and that is what I consider the more likely claim that the bottom left panel on this page has been censored. It has very blatantly had Wasp's cleavage eliminated later down the line of production. I don't think an artist would draw a chest that big and that barren. Someone has come along later and erased the definition. I do tend to mock Christopher Clairvoyant's writing of romance, and it is again bad here. So let's get past that and to the team up. The two Avengers discover Spider-Man, who has been beaten by an unseen foe. What works about this is, much like I said about the issue of Miss Marbles I reviewed by Christopher Clairvoyant, these are two characters, Wasps and Hank Gordon, who can benefit in some way from Christopher Clairvoyant writing them up the way he writes characters up. Too often, this is 1977, too often these two characters would be dumped from the Avengers or plain forgotten about. Their powers and uses, ironically, minimised. and only shown to be size alteration or communication with ants. The only major stories done with them were to the detriment of Hank Gordon. He was often prone to writers having him suffer mental collapses, and then poor Wasps was quite frequently injured and left to recover in a hospital bed. We find out from Spider-Man that his assailant was a supervillain called Equinox, the thermodynamic man. How many Marvel villains are there that are known as the thermodynamic man? One half of Equinox is fire, one half ice. That is how it is usually depicted. The idea is that he has both fire and ice powers. He was very clearly created to oppose Human Fire and Snowman. It was an earlier issue of Spider-Man Team Up, one of the ones without Spider-Man. He appeared in that. That was his first appearance. I have never read it. I would assume Equinox was created by Gary Conman. It seems like a Gary Conman thing. You might know Equinox from Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, where he was a boss you had to fight, and he was one of the hardest bosses in the game. He was a tank that dealt pretty heavy damage to you. Equinox also never received an handybook profile until the 2000s. I think Equinox is an alright villain. I do think his genesis is rubbish, that he was so transparently created to oppose Snowman and Human Fire. But when you get him away from that, he can be a solid opponent for heroes. We haven't actually had a great look at Equinox yet. Well, you have if you paid attention to the cutaways. But here he is, Equinox. Top half is ice, bottom half is fire, but they can swap over. The bottom half can be ice and the top half can be fire. And much like in the video game, he too is a challenge for these heroes. He is quite powerful, naturally. We also start to get into his origin and his backstory, which that original story with him didn't offer. I also need to say I actually love how Jason Byrne draws this costume for Hank Gordon. It's a design that looks its absolute best when Jason Byrne is the one drawing it. We get one of the all-time best Hank Gordon panels in the next issue. Letters here, none of them are by Kurt Busey, so that is great. It means I can just keep reading the issue. We have this big battle between the heroes and the supervillain. During it, we also have a woman, a civilian who is following them. Margay Sorensen. We will get more on her next issue. A lot more. Christopher Clairvoyant loves his civilian characters after all. I won't explain her here because the main thing about her is revealed on the next pages. What works best in this issue is As I said, we are getting to see Hank Gordon and Wasps actually star in a story. They're not being brushed aside or overshadowed by Thor or Iron Man or any of the other Avengers. They are allowed to stand on their own, and we as a reader can see how they are as heroic or action ready as their fellow Avengers. I do really like this story for it. I think this Spider-Man team-up is massively responsible for firmly establishing the married couple as having far greater application into superhero action than previously believed. We learn Margay is Equinox's mum. Not as hot as Dartboard's mum. The good thing though is that Equinox could have sex with Dartboard's mum. There's no stigma involved with him fucking someone else's mum. What happens though, Iron Man gets annoyed that the Gordons are being seen as competent adventurers, so he has to show up and try and hog the page time by throwing cupcakes around. Arsehole. Big Bang, like the Fuzzbox album. Big Bang. Hank Gordon is maybe dead in the explosion. Of course he's not, but that is our cliffhanger. Equinox has murdered an Avenger. Good little two-part of this. One of CC's best stories even. In some ways, Spider-Man Team-Up was the perfect fit for him. He could use it as a platform to give a little push to various characters that were in need of it. But it quickly becomes the case he prefers using the title to continue to write up the same characters he is already writing elsewhere, or the same characters he wants to adopt as his own. I recommend this one to fans of stories and fans of words. I'll give it 7 thumbs up.